starting a little late, so digging might start a little late.
Okay. So 10 o'clock, give or take. We'll start doing some excavation in there. Got everything set up in there. Lunch, if you ordered lunch, we'll pick that up, bring it here, and have a picnic over there under the trees. Those are the restrooms over there if you need a pit stop. Let's see.
And there's water and Gatorade under the tent.
Okay, water and Gatorade under the tent. If we do actually have a quorum for a board meeting, we'll have that after lunch, but I'll get everybody rounded up for that when the time comes. And then wagon tours this afternoon?
Yes.
Starting, I don't have I forgot it.
After
Sometime
lunch.
after lunch.
I think right after lunch.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Linda. Thanks for coming, everybody.
I'm not sure they brought the cups for the Gatorade, so we may have to get somebody to check on that.
Okay, someone should be bringing cups and tea and everything.
Okay.
I haven't seen them yet, though.
When you start working you hard down here and you can't get anything to drink, they might turn ugly on you. So are all of you, how many are new to digging? Anybody? Okay.
I mean, digging or
Digging.
for stuff?
Archaeology.
Oh, yeah.
All right. I wanted to do a little introduction to Cahawba and to the idea of archaeology itself, and particularly here at Cahawba, the idea of above ground archaeology. Archaeology is, you don't necessarily have to dig to apply the same principles of archaeology. So we're really into the relic landscape here. So I want to start with that idea that this is a ghost town. This was Alabama's first state capital. Anybody from Huntsville? Close your ears. When we were thinking about becoming a state, the federal government gave it almost a square mile of land to Alabama on which to develop its first state capital. Now this was just wilderness, and the reason they did that is because then they draw up these lots and they sell the lots at inflated prices, and that's how they created Alabama's first treasury. So it was a pretty brilliant plan on Governor Bibb's part. But because it was a wilderness, they still had to write the Constitution, be accepted as a state, so they went to Huntsville. So sometimes people say Huntsville's the first state capital. But here we say, now close your ears, Huntsville is like the Motel 6 of state capitals. That's where you go while your real house is being built. Okay, don't tell them when you go home. A frontier capital, there was one really large brick structure, which was the State House, which is what we're trying to discover. But at that time, during the capital period, everybody else pretty much lived in 1- and 2-room log cabins. Because at the beginning, the steamboats weren't running and they didn't have any sawmills. So they pretty much made these threw up hundreds of log cabins at the beginning. They didn't have clapboards, so they couldn't make frame buildings at the beginning. So it was very rough and tumble. The editor of the newspaper said, women and children should not go out at night because of the gunplay in the streets. So, and I hesitate to use this analogy because I'm getting old and maybe younger people don't understand it, but do y'all know what gunsmoke is? Okay, so it's more like Gunsmoke than Gone with the Wind. But in 1826, the capital went to Tuscaloosa, and lots in your textbooks, they'll say then the town died. Nothing could be further than the truth. First of all, the idea that there was a flood in 1825 that caused it, that's total myth. The flooding has gotten worse over time, so we have had really bad floods here. But if you chart them, the worst floods have been since the dams came in. And the first flood to top the bluff was in 1865, and that's when the county seat went to Selma, and that's when the town died, 1865. So in 1860, this was the county seat of Dallas County, and it was the center of the wealthiest part of Dallas County, because North Dallas County gets kind of hilly. South Dallas County was all those very wealthy planters and all their enslaved laborers. And I want you to know, even though we're below the poverty line now, in 1860, Dallas County had the 4th highest per capita wealth, not in Alabama, but in the entire United States. So these were the wealthiest of the wealthy. And when if you do the tour this afternoon, you'll see the larger site. We had the largest mansion in the state, the 2nd finest hotel. Hi, y'all. So this was really something. So these were the wealthiest of the wealthy. A couple times a year they go up to Saratoga, New York to take the waters and do the horse races. People in New York City knew Cahawba. Some of the people that were involved, the extended family that built the State House, owned several ocean-going side-wheelers that ran continually between Mobile, Cuba, and New York City. And one of them was named Cahawba. There's the Cahawba, the Black Warrior, the Bienville, and the DeSoto, 2 pairs. So these were the movers and shakers in America. They had lots of money, lots and lots of money. And then, of course, all their enslaved laborers. Cahawba was always 60% African American. After the Civil War, it was like 95% African American. It became a freedmen's village. And in Selma, they called Cahawba the Mecca of the Radical Republican Party. And that wasn't a compliment. But, you know, Republicans were the party of Lincoln. So all the newly emancipated slaves voted for Lincoln. And the abandoned courthouse they took over to give speeches. So a black congressman would come down here and rally all the newly emancipated people to vote Republican. So the main street of town is, I got a picture of it, is this one going right here. That was Vine Street. And Joth will tell you more about the layout. The layout of the town is really spectacular. I got a picture of it. Now this is after it's a ghost town, so this is, but it gives you an idea. This was the county courthouse with the spectacle windows. So those 3-story buildings. Really wealthy people with really big mansions, no more log cabins, right? Now the fascinating thing about this is Governor Bibb drew up this town plan and sold the lots. People knew it was going to become the capital, so they spent as much for lots in the middle of the wilderness as they would have for a lot in Charleston or Savannah. But this was the town plan, and it's basically blocks like any old town plan. We're located at the confluence of the Alabama and the Cahawba, but there's one block that's not square, and it's extra big. It's a semicircular block that would have been located right over there. Now, I came here about 30 years ago, and the popular notion by the historians was this was an afterthought because the poor little pack animals needed to come at an angle at the bluff to bring those cotton bales up and down. But when we first did the archaeology the first year, we found out it was completely something different. And then, guess what? You should always go do your document search first. This map, 1819. Here's 1817 map, done by the first federal surveyors that came in to run the township range lines. The semicircle's already there. And better yet, they label it. So we spend a summer of archaeology just wasting people's money. Semicircle with a circle inside of it. Anybody want to guess what that is? The round thing is an Indian mound, and the thing around it is a semicircular palisade around the village, which is pretty typical from sort of late Mississippi, and it's what we found from the artifact. What did Governor Bibb do? He used this relic Indian landscape as a centerpiece of his town plan. Same time we're pushing the Indians out of the way to settle this area, right? This main road you drove down, Capitol Street, with an O, not an A. A means the place, the city. O means the building. That is Capitol, or it could as well be State House Street. Dead ends at the vista of a big Indian mound where he was going to put the State House. So think about that. What a symbolic town plan. As the centerpiece of his town plan, at the end of this extra wide vista, he wanted to put the State House atop this Indian mound, sort of showing dominion over the soil. I think that's amazing, and that's something that was lost in the history books. It was all there in black and white, but you know, you can't see something. Those historians need archaeologists to show them how to look at things a little bit differently, right? So we have to pat ourselves on the back. So that's a part of history that we've reclaimed for Alabama, which I think is amazingly cool. So right now, we're just going to take a little walk around here. Anybody got any questions yet?
Where was the Indian mound?
It was right over there.
Right over
Should I go ahead and tell you what happened to it?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Was it a Mississippi?
You want to help me tell people about it?
Yeah.
Okay. You get to be John Tyler Morgan. Will you read something for me?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So here's John Tyler Morgan. Imagine is. Well, first, I guess I should back up and do the archaeology. I'm making a short story to you. In 1500.
Okay.
The The rest of it's all been backfilled. So when I first came here, we did test units every 40 feet. And on that side of sort of the imaginary semicircle, we found lots and lots of late Mississippian Indian artifacts. We didn't find hardly any. So I went, and that was the time when those DeSoto anniversaries. So I went and told all my colleagues over at Moundville and prehistorians, and they all about peed their pants, and they all rushed over here to help us figure it out. So we put in a couple test trenches in a couple different summers, and here's sort of a profile. Does anybody understand what I'm showing you here? This is the ground surface, and these are all the different layers of soil that we dug through. That very bottom layer is the only one that had prehistoric artifacts. Like this place, and they were wine bottles from like 1820. When they cleared this place, rushed and dumped it in that open moat and burned it. And what happened then is Governor Bibb went to get the money to build the State House. After he raised all this money, he goes to the legislators and they go, we're only giving you $10,000. Which, to give you some perspective, they spent more money on a party for Lafayette when he came in 1825 than $10,000. So that now, even if you buy a lot today inside that semicircle, it's called lot so-and-so of the Capitol with an O, reserve. So he reserved that with the idea that they were going to give him more money in 1825 to build the grand State House. And he moved over onto this lot, and he built, tongue-in-cheek, because the legislature didn't give him money, temporary accommodations for the legislature. So this is where our first State House was built. He intended to build it over there. He had died in a riding accident, and then the North Alabama folks voted to move it up to Tuscaloosa. Sorry, we're a little. But so looking again at this profile, bottom layer Indian artifacts, next layer initial town 1819, 1820. Then all the rest of those were like dumps of stuff, and they happened over a very short period of time. They appeared to have happened in the late 1850s. We had the beauty of having, archaeology is not really about artifacts, it's about the science of context. The context artifacts are found in tells you the story. So we have the beauty of having context of old newspapers that were printed here at Cahawba. So went back and he looked in the 1850 newspapers. Okay, now I'm getting to you. I haven't forgot you. So later became a very famous senator. He's considered the father of the Panama Canal. Served for a very long time, but at this time he was a young lawyer in Cahawba, but he was a great orator. He was always a great orator, so you're going to have to live up to it. So in 1858, they're inaugurating Cahawba's new railroad. So we have to imagine we're over there, right where the Indian Mountain's supposed to be, but it's not, obviously. So we're right over there. On either side of this road are two cotton warehouses. Now they've taken the boards off the side of one of the cotton warehouses so all us ladies can sit in the shade so it won't ruin our delicate skin. And the locomotive is sitting in the middle. And on the cow catcher is a little platform. There's a sheet over, the name of the locomotive is Cahawba. The railroad tracks go all the way up Capitol Street. And when they finish the speeches, they're going to pull the sheet down, and you see in gold letters Cahawba written on it. And then we're all going to jump on it, and we're going to ride up the road and back. Before we do that, there's a bunch of little girls with rose petals in their baskets, and they're strewing rose petals along the track. So it's some sort of like mechanical wedding or something, I don't know. But it was really quite something. And on the cow catcher is Mr. Morgan, and will you be Mrs. Pegues and Daniel? Sure. Mrs. Pegues is the mayor's wife. She's the most beautiful woman in 3 counties, not 4, but 3. And on her lap, she's holding a bottle of muscadine wine. So when we reveal the letters, you're going to take that wine and you're going to break it over the nose locomotive. And I'm getting into too much detail, but I just love this. So, okay. So the other thing we have to imagine is we can smell the scent of barbecue, because whenever we do anything at Cahawba, we always have barbecue. All right, so John Tyler Morgan steps up, and he's going to read this cold, so y'all may want to move in and move. And he's going to what happened to the Indian Mound. Come on, you can come in closer. Oh. And also something about the State House, where we'll be digging today.
Here within the circle of our vision, those who have preceded us have selected different places on which to erect works of importance to the societies under their care. some military race of men whose name has fled the eager research of the historians, have been erected their palisades and sunk their deep ditches around a skillfully placed so as to command this splendid sweep of the Alabama River over there, I think. And they're high ground thrown up perhaps as memorials to great events and used for sacrificial altars and for resting places of the dead, have all given away before the appropriating energy of this generation.
Pause there. Did you hear that? What happened to the mound?
Now, we have gathered their labors and heaped them together in the embankment for the railroad, where their curious pottery, their crude implements of warfare, their bones mingled in a singular tribute to the superiority of their successors in the dominions of this soil. Near to us also is a spot selected by the young state of Alabama for her first metropolis. We do not complain at the divorcement of the state from her first, and subsequently have the purest choice.
Consequently, their purest choice.
Consequently, her purest choice, nor the envy of different places that have been succeeded to her fickle favors. I guess that's why they selected this for the state capital.
We weren't bitter at all that they took it away.
Yeah. If regrets were ever felt at the early separation, they have long been ceased. Even the old capital has finally fallen down and no longer afflicts us with a memorial of broken faith and this departed greatness. Not a stone now remains to tell where it once stood, but all is remaining is the dust that has been heaped up in the inevitable railroad embankment. Truly, this is a classic earth. It presents uses. It approaches the conception of an insane sculptor who entered Rome with hammer and chisel, determined to powder up all the ancient works of the great masters of Rome and to mold them into a new form of so divine that all the gods will ascend on earth and dwell in it bodily. Today, Cahawba puts a new life, a real vitality with all this, a power she never has possessed, a power that knows no decline and is incapable of destruction. So
they were putting a lot of faith in the railroad, weren't they? And as you drove down Capitol Street, that's where the railroad embankment was, the 1858 railroad embankment. We had an earlier one. So you were driving, if he's right about, their implements of warfare, their bones and blah, 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 blah. And how much of that is poetry and how much of that is real. But we do know, if you've seen Mississippian pottery, it has a lot of iconography on it. And the one thing that I do know that happened is we had some very active masons here in town, Freemasonry. And they're sort of into a lot of iconography too, little aprons with all the design on it. When they were grading away the mound to make the embankment, they were picking up the artifacts and they took it to their, whatever you call, lodge, I guess. I would say den, but. And she's a great story about symbolic nature of this town plan that Governor Bibb built, and not understanding the nature of that there was this Indian village here. When Governor Bibb came here, there was a ghost town already, So I just want to walk us around, get a little context for what we're going to be doing today by just looking at this lot here. But know that, originally there was an Indian mound over there. Was going to be the State House on top of it, and that didn't work out. So, early on, the state government was the center of the town, And then after they left, what do you think became the center of their reason for being here? Setting up by the visitor center. So on one side, we had the place where they were auctioning off the slaves. On the other side, we had the place where they were justifying why they had slaves. So, and the warehouse is in the middle where they loaded it onto the warehouse. So it still remained a sort of a symbolic landscape, or at least I think so. So now town plan, each lot is 300 feet by 300 feet, which by the way, don't freak, but we're not going to be digging in centimeters today. We've done a compromise because everything here was laid out in feet. The lots are 150 feet, the houses are 150 feet, so we chose to use feet, to use our measurements, so we can understand what's going on much easier. Exactly, and sort of getting in their heads.
Good on you.
So we compromised by using engineer scale, which is tenths of feet, so it's easier to add. So we have all tapes in folding rules are in engineer scale, so tenths of, they're all dead now. But they left, believe it or not, messages behind for us, and as archaeologists, we're always finding messages in some ways when we dig up, but some of them are above ground. So let's walk back here and see if you can figure out, there's a very intentional message right there. So let's see if y'all can find it and interpret it. Yeah, go ahead. Undead residents for us. I'm not too biased, am I?
Tens of feet, I love it.
We are a refuge for historical archaeologists here at Cahawba.
Especially for those of us who, archaeology doesn't have to be delivered. I'm so jealous.
All right. What you see?
I see a grave.
Yeah, great. And there's a very clearly understandable message in this one. This is the grave of Mary Eliza Perrine. And let me tell you, when I first came here, there was a guy who had a little barbecue stand down here, and he would tell the history. I'll put history in quotes. And he said Mary had been a secretary at the State House, and she so loved her job that she asked to be buried in the back of the lot. Well, the first thing I figured out was there's 4 lots on each block, and the State House was on the northeast corner. These 2 lots on this side. So when his wife died, he just planted her in the backyard. Later, he married a wealthier wife and moved down the road, left the first one here, and his wife helped him build the largest mansion in the state, but she stayed here. But that's interesting because if you look at this, the message here, you know, it tells you who she was, when she died. She was born in 1816 and she died in 1838. We know from doing the history she died in childbirth. Her daughter became a very famous, nobody knows her now, but in the 19th century, she was a famous writer. And in fact, she came back and she wrote, here's a poem that she wrote when she visited this tomb. It says, I am weary, mother. I am weary, mother, and fain I would rest beside thee in the cold and silent tomb. The rayless path of a life unblessed are dark beside the brightness of death's gloom. I place my hand upon the marble white above thee, mother, and it chills my frame. Yet 'tis not cold as hearts which take delight in casting stains upon a once fair name. Sounds like she was having a hard time. And in fact, she probably was, because she was sort of a very modern woman. She left her husband in Georgia, and she went to New York City to pursue a career. And eventually, when I quite divorced him, I guess, and did quite well, thank you. a obelisk, and it has a father and son buried on it. And hey! And they died in a shootout right on this street. There were 3 on one side, 3 on the other. 2 of the Bells died. I think at least one of them was shot in the back. But they were, the other side were exonerated in a court of law. So their mother and wife had a different opinion and wanted them to know it and want us to know it today. So, see what I'm saying? These are quite explicit messages.
Right.
Okay, what you got?
This monument, with the permission of his family, is erected to Dr. Ulmer by his numerous friends in and near Cahawba, spelled with no W.
No W.
As a testimony of their regard for him as a friend and physician.
Okay, thank you. So, we go all this trouble to dig, to find out stuff, landscape for us to find. So this is an intentional message. So now let's walk back over to the road. You see there's some bushes there and something next to it, and let's see if you can find, excuse me. dead resident.
Well,
Well, yeah, there is a well here. It's probably been more. Well, again, there used to be a sign that said, see here, that said, well for State House parking lot. But of course, the State House, it wasn't on this lot, it was on that lot. But something we did find that's significant is Cahawba was known as the city of artesian wells, and people would maybe burn them intentionally, right? But recently, I mean, I can remember that being open, and recently the timber companies got it, and they've suppressed the fire, and they're just, the Nature Conservancy has bought, what now, about 4,000 acres, and they've freed from the timber lease 80 acres that they can restore against the road. So as you're driving down to Alabama's first capital, you get to see a landscape that we haven't seen for a long time. And right now, on your way home, you need to get out and just take a picture. Looks like a milkweed, you know, that stands about this tall. It's blooming, and it's called the old Cahawba rosinweed.
The yellow?
Yellow.
I saw on the right, I thought about milkweed.
Yeah, you have to get up close to see how pretty they are.
Yeah.
They're like this, but that actually grows nowhere else in the world. I think this county and the next, and we probably have the largest stand of it. So, let's see. But you can see the 1858 rail. I don't know if you all can see it. Can you see how the land goes? And you can walk out on little ways if you want. It's just very narrow. It's about this wide. Not natural landform. What do you suppose it is? Well, it used to have a bridge washed out in the middle.
That's the railroad bed?
Yeah, this is the 1833 railroad embankment. They tried to start a railroad in the 1830s. So just, you know, I want to tell you about the first excavation we did at the State House that kind of reinforces that idea, okay? So, this is generally what we find, those of you that are historical archaeologists, or how many of you consider yourself mainly a historical archaeologist? All right. So, this is the kind of stuff we find all the time. I mean, we love pottery. We can tell you more about Grandma's pottery. Don't show me, no pretending. I can't help you, I'm sorry. But this is our bread and butter, you know, this is how we date everything. You know, the vessel form tells how they used it, how much money they had, what they could afford. This is what we love, so. And this is what you find all the time. I was talking about coming to the barbecue, you know, when they inaugurated, they bring barbecue. We're gonna have barbecue today. But I'm sure it's gonna come in plastic containers. No plastic containers back then. What would happen is you'd have your slave, because these were really wealthy people, put the barbecue in a really nice platter like this and bring it to the picnic. Yeah.
With historical archaeology, what archives have you been working with for papers?
Archives, well, you know, now it's really easy because a lot of archives are online.
Yeah.
And, oh my gosh. And newspapers are my favorite thing. So, of
Have
course,
you just worked with the Alabama and Montgomery, or have you
oh
done
no,
more
I
than
miss.
that?
You get Alabama Heritage. About a year ago, I wrote something about camels in Cahawba, and we kind of solved it's about a lady pirate and illicit slave trade, and you couldn't figure that out before. Now, because they moved from Washington to New York to Galveston to Alabama to Georgia, you could put together all the stories they told in different places. So, not so much.
I was looking for some information.
Yeah.
It was here.
Yeah, and most of our stuff is really, we've just sort of record stripped other things that are available and sorted it by names and by block. So it's really not anything new. It's just we've sorted it in ways. So what we tell people, if you have an ancestor or a name you want to research, let us know and we'll just copy everything we have. In return, that maybe you might do the same for us. And we sorted them into blocks to try to figure out what those are. But anyway, this is what we usually find. Many years ago, we didn't own these lots over here. We owned these over here. And the corner of the lot is the stake right underneath the table. But sometime along in the chain of title, they enlarged this lot by 8 feet. So we were able to dig a unit on what was originally a State House lot. It's odd things that don't seem to belong, that are dug deeper. And they found, this is all broken brick. And be careful not to get too close to the sides so we don't crack the sides. But this has been open and we had some rainy weather, so it's a little messy. Maybe come from the early 1830s. So what we're looking at is construction debris from the State House. They dug a little deeper and they found, this is where they dug deeper, that's that. We call call it a builder's trench. So if you're going to build a brick building, you dig a long trench, make it flat on the bottom, and the bricklayers start to build it up. So all the artifacts in there would date from the time they're like the construction workers eating lunch and that kind of stuff. So, and usually when they take away the stuff, they just start at the surface, and so it's all laid there buried. But then sometimes they go, oh, we want those bricks there down there too. And that's what
We're kind of pigeonholed as first state capital, and people don't realize that there's so much more to Cahawba, like this Indian village. Did Linda cover a little bit about this morning, talking about
Yes.
the town plan?
Yes, cover a little
Okay.
bit of it.
And she showed you the difference in the two maps?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. You know, first map of Cahawba, they're laying out the township and range lines that we use even today for land sales. And in the process, they identified what they called ancient Indian work. From this cartoon-like drawing, it looks like there was a moat with maybe a mound in the center.
Okay, that's a mound.
It's kind of a representation of a mound.
Okay, yeah.
If you look behind me, there is no mound. But we'll find out what happened to that in a few minutes. The moat is still here. There's some debate whether the Spanish explorer de Soto visited Cahawba, the legendary Malvilla, up for contention. Hopefully we'll be able to answer that question before long. But as Linda said, the original plan was to have our first state capital, looking at this second map of Cahawba, first state capital sitting high atop that Indian mound, overlooking a broad sweep of the Alabama River. Streets laid out in a grid format, 80 feet wide with the exception of Capitol Street, an extra wide width of 100 feet. So you would have this long scenic vista, and at the end our first state capital sitting high atop that Indian mound. So again, by the time the settlers got here,
And that was the mound right there, the Indian mound right there.
yeah, let's put those two maps
okay.
side by side.
Yeah.
Rather than obliterate any evidence of an older culture, which I kind of would have assumed they would have done back then, they didn't. They embraced their past and actually used what was inscribed on the landscape by the Native Americans and used that to influence the town design. So it looked at states that simply chose their largest city to be the capital. Cahawba was a planned city, carved out of the wilderness, built from scratch. But that's not our only claim to fame in this area. This is really the heart of Cahawba, the spiritual heart where all these historic events happened. Not just the Indian village, but Castle Morgan. So let's go see if we can find any evidence of Castle Morgan. Looking, not the state capital in the 1850s, but the county seat of that county. Okay, so there's kind of a high ground right here. Does anyone see any evidence of brick in this area?
I don't know, maybe.
All brick. This is the location of what I call Castle Morgan. It is kind of soft. I've got a few pictures of it. Here is one depiction of Castle Morgan. Not a real castle. How many of you thought it was going to be a real castle? Just a neighborhood that housed some 3,000 Yankee troops. This was drawn by Jesse Hawes, a POW who survived. His experiences were recorded in a book called Cahawba, Captive Boys in Blue. The book is so old it's in the public domain. You can literally just download a PDF version and read it. Tell you what kind of city it was back in that era. But I promised you a view of the river and some columns. So we're going to move you on back down here. Photo here, that's not the front door. The side of the house. The front of the house faces the river. We have done a little bit of archaeology here. Our test units revealed that the brick is maybe 2 courses below grade. Pretty shallow. It's kind of amazing they're even standing by this point.
Is this the part that faces the river?
That's the part that we're looking at right now.
Right there, yeah, okay.
So that's the front looking at the river. And those columns might have been wood. They're built off the ground. The Crocherons, General Forrest and General Wilson met here. After the Battle of Selma, met here, talked about the prisoner exchange. But other than that, it passed through a series of owners before fire destroyed it in 1921. Talking about these clues on the landscape, sometimes they're very subtle messages. If you look closely at the mortar joints, I'm no architect, but there's a very unusual feature. For some reason it's called penciling, but it's actually painting evenly spaced white lines. You think about how hoity-toity the people in Cahawba were. You know, the fourth richest county in the country. Nothing was ever good enough for them. We talked about the Cahawba rifles. Some regiments had a feather or pom-pom. The Cahawba rifles had both. You know, it was just nothing was ever good enough for these folks. So to give the illusion of evenly spaced, high-quality brick, painted these evenly spaced white lines.
And the brick has a little curve in it.
Yeah, so I always ask the school kids, how do you make a round column out of rectangular brick? You can't, but you can make it out of brick that's shaped like a wedge.
Trying to get a picture of both of them. Bob doesn't promises not to fall in the river. Okay.
Be careful. A few years ago, they legalized gator hunting every August here in Dallas County, and they caught a record-setting gator some 14 plus feet. The newspaper article said the gator was captured just south of where the Cahawba meets the Alabama. That's like literally like right over there.
You didn't try to get together so I can get a picture of y'all.
Turn around. I don't want to block these people in. How you doing? The correct answer is the slave quarters. That is the brick slave quarters to a much larger house that stood in front. I got some pictures I'll show you. If you're curious about the inside, you are allowed to go in with a ticket during our Haunted History event, October 21st and 28th. We will allow people to come down after dark. We will travel on this wagon to the haunted locations where I will tell you some of the ghost stories, and then you'll get to go inside that brick building, and we have an amateur group of ghost hunters with their digital cameras. And what could they have done during the Great Depression to put out-of-work draftsmen and architects back to work? Send them across the country to catalog and photograph old buildings.
Have pictures of the inside too
Yes, it does.
on the website.
Yeah, and it is listed under Cahawba without a W. Which I gotta get the spelling difference in a second. You know, I didn't want to block him in, but shoot, he just kind of a half cellar you could step down into. It's in dire need of restoration, but if you were to go under the house there, you would see a brick floor. Excuse me. You would see evidence of plaster on the walls. Excuse me. Even some of the brickwork has that penciling. And I'm always sure to point that out because there are people who really cling to that myth that the state capitol was destroyed by floodwaters. And I have to tell you, it was a technological marvel. This is a well. It's a well that you don't have to lower a bucket down at the end of a rope because the water comes to you. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the water is always bubbling up.
I see a coin.
Is it good to drink, do you think?
There is a snapping turtle in there. And longtime tour guide Tommy Coleman, before he passed away, he told me one evening he found people skinny dipping in here. So maybe you shouldn't drink it.
Oh, how come there's money in it?
It's a wishing well too.
So it's throw it in there.
And as the last photo depicts, here's the Alabama Anthropological Society,
That's
1919.
my second wish today.
They are on the hunt for DeSoto. So they come down to Cahawba and look for DeSoto's tracks, and they have a group portrait, taking fun. Now let me ask you this. When you go out in the field and do work, do any of you wear neckties? Well,
I'm wearing one right now.
you're the only one. Any of you wear vests or bow ties or lace-up boots? Look at how they're dressed. What kind of deal? I don't know. I just know it's 1919. Mr. Kirkpatrick threw them a picnic.
Leaves are on the trees.
Yeah.
I